strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. Albert Einstein. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I'm your host, Shamiza Ali, and it is truly a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Good evening to everyone joining us on YouTube and Facebook. Tonight's topic is the school cash grants and their impact on families. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, Guyana, and the Caribbean. Funding support is by well-known philanthropist Dave Narayan from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara Singh.
Thank you very much, Shamila. Welcome to our listeners and viewers.
Thank you, Dr. Tara. Our panelists tonight is Dr. Ganga Ramdas and Professor Mahindra Hariraj, who will join us shortly. Our honorable guest tonight is the Minister of Education, the Honorable Priya Manickchand. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Tara, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening again, and welcome to my fellow panelists, Dr. Ramdas and Professor Mahin, who will join us a bit later. And welcome to our esteemed Minister of Education, Honorable Priya Manickchand. We are very happy to have you here today to discuss some important issues relating to education, especially the school cash grants. So without much ado, let's go straight to the topic. If you want to make any general statement for us about impending local government elections, and then we can proceed with the subject matter proper.
Right. So I'm very glad to be here with you all and with your viewership. I remain grateful for any forum that allows political and other leaders in Ghana to express views, whether they're views that are like mine or even diametrically opposed views. I think the world is getting accustomed to this very free, these forums that allow for all kinds of views. And I think it's going to do one of two things. We'll all sync with that freedom, or we'll train ourselves as a human race to begin to filter out sense from nonsense. So I'm actually in the category that believes the latter, is what will happen. So I think the more the merrier. So I'm glad you have this forum, and I'm very glad to be here tonight.
Do you want to make any comments about the impending local government election before we proceed?
Just we have elections on Monday. It's local government elections. The PPP never takes anything for granted. We are contesting in all the constituencies, all the local authority areas. That cannot be said for any other party, including the main opposition party. So by with their absence in contesting several places, we've already won in those places. But as I speak to you here, so I had committed to you without thinking it through properly. There are comrades all over this country, ordinary people, leaders of the party, new candidates, people who are with us for the first time. They're all over this country campaigning because we take these things seriously. With the PPP, we're never going to rig an election. It's never going to be something we ever contemplate, which means that if we're to win an election, we have to win hearts and souls during the period between elections. And then we have to work really hard for elections to make sure we win. And every political party is in the business of trying to win. So because of that, we're constantly working for people in communities. And that's been accelerated in this period because of the impending elections. I expect that we'll do very well, but we say that with very great caution because we still have a lot of days left and a lot of work to put in.
Yeah. Is Monday a public holiday in Guyana?
I don't think I saw a public holiday. I don't think I saw it as a public holiday. Naturally, some places will close because a lot of polling places are actually schools. It makes sense to close the schools. The place of poll is actually physically in the school, but I don't think, I'm trying to remember if the previous years they were a public holiday. I don't remember. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. Before we proceed, let me introduce Dr. Ganga Ramdas. I don't know if you know him, but he was the former head of the Department of Economics and International Relations at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. He had worked, he was in charge of a desk at the Bank of Guyana years ago. So he has a lot of experience in banking. He knows the banking system in Guyana. Dr. Ganga, you want to make a brief opening remarks?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Honorable Minister of Education. We welcome you here as well. I'll make a comment and then ask a brief question. First, the Because We Care program, the school grant program, is going to be quite beneficial because of its design in terms of cash versus in kind help. So as a cash, people are able to know their needs and make choices. So that's a big plus for the program. It also lends flexibility to link with incomes-based programs. So that's a big plus for as a start because we can then formalize the program and put it in terms of a program planning, budgeting framework with the national budget down the road. So I see that as a big plus in terms of the design. So the question that came to mind is how do we distinguish the really needy families with their kids versus the ones who can afford what guardrails we have. For example, you may have employed versus unemployed. You may have professionals and then the not professionals, the one, for example, who live on the sea dam top. So we have these different categories to cater to. So how do we address that in the program? That's the basic question.
So first of all, it is budgeted in annually. This is a program of the PPPC, and how we came by this is we promised this program in our manifesto. So what happened is prior to the 2020 elections, we went to the population, bottom house meetings, community meetings, door to door, big consultations, and other things to try to determine what we would offer as our promises to the population. And re- overwhelmingly, parents, private school and public school parents, of every strata, because I see you try to distinguish just now between different types of family structures. Everybody said they wanted this grant. And so the promise was that within the first 5 years, it would be at least $50,000. We're at $40,000 in year three. And so as soon as we came back in 2021, this was budgeted for, and it has been in the program every year since. Um, it's not the only program we have that assists families. We have begun to give, for the first time in the history of the country, all children all the textbooks they need. So by September of this year, all children, nursery, primary, and secondary, will have all the textbooks they need in their book bags. So they are able to take it home. We've never had that before. We give breakfast to or all grade six children and food support to all nursery and up to grade two children. All the hinterland primary schools are on a hot meal kind of program. We have been giving to all our exam students all the materials they need, like pencils and rulers and so on. So it's very difficult. I've served in two ministries, the Ministry of Human Services and the Ministry of Education. And if anyone were to ask me to do anything that's mean tested, I think I'll refuse, because it is very difficult. I mean, we can see, and I'm giving you a live example of something I recently dealt with, a really nice looking, nicely appointed home from outside. But inside, the family had no lights. They had nothing in their cupboards. Literally, they had no fridge on. And they had a child writing CXC. And so, in fact, I came upon the family because the school said to me, this is a really bright kid. We expected him to be in the top numbers, but he isn't coming to school. So I went looking for him. And the reason he wasn't coming to school is because he really couldn't afford to get to school and get lunch in his lunch kit and get all the things that he needed to do. He's finishing off his exams now, so we're really grateful about that. But it's very difficult when you begin the means testing. So I'd say a universal grant to everyone. Everyone has expenses, whether you're rich or poor. And then people get to decide. I know a lot of people, not a lot, but I know people who um, don't use the grant for themselves. They give it to, myself included, give it to other persons. And that's the kind of, one way or the other, it's a nice building out of a program.
Okay, we're joined by Professor Mahin Hariraj. Welcome, Professor. You want to make any comment or ask a question?
Sure, Dr. Tara. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Minister Manickchand. Given that you have the most perhaps critical ministry to shape the future of Guyana, the cash grant is something that has been positive towards the household and ensuring that the students receive the necessary funds. Two observation in over the couple of days since the cash grant has been distributed. On social media, there are some sporadic videos of parents or one parent trying to usurp the grant, and there are some videos circulating about that. And I know the ministry doesn't necessarily control what happens. Um, how is the ministry maybe tackling any of this nuisance that is arising out of the distribution?
So we have a couple of rules. I mean, we are giving the grant to the parent who has custody of the child because, like any other country, we have broken families here. Some get along even though they're split up, and some don't. That's not unique to Guyana, as you know. So our position is the person with custody is who gets the grant. One or two parents, I think, have slipped through, where the person without custody dishonestly came for the grant, and we're trying to and have tried to deal with those. And as much as you've seen the one or two, because that's very sensational, the videos that have some kind of altercation, you've also seen the beauty of really innovative memes and poems and songs and so on that people have created for this period. So I think if you live here, I see a couple of foreigners speaking. $40,000 per child can outfit your child very comfortably for school in Guyana. And anybody who tells you differently does not know the country, which is why you don't see any parents saying anything like that, because it is an enormous help for parents. When this was $10,000, we had a very large interest and turnout, and that was stopped by the AP and UAFC. And they have repeated again their philosophy of not believing in the grant. In many ways, they think it should be given in a voucher. Now, here's the problem with that. We will, if we give it in a voucher, we limit people as to where they can shop and what they can shop. And we shouldn't do that because anything that helps a child. Look, I remember the first time we did this grant in 2014. There was a mother who said, "I'm not listening to you." She told me in front of a whole meeting with a mic with cameras on her, um, tell me anything but clothes. I got 5 of them. And they wear each other's clothes, and we've always been doing that, and it works. What I go in and buy with this is black tanks so that they don't have to get up early in the morning and fetch water. And that is a useful expenditure of the money. I know people who bought bicycles for their children. I know people who bought, I saw someone saying they're going to make a down payment on a car because they apparently have a lot of children. There are very many different ways you could serve a child. If you buy a stove, you can serve those children. You buy a fridge, you buy an iron. There are tons of ways outside of, because I can tell you that it is enough to outfit children and leave some change over. And so I think people get more freedom. And I really am concerned about people who believe somehow or the other that parents who receive this who have been doing the best they could for their children all their lives will somehow or the other just not do the best thing for their children because they got some money. It just doesn't add up. It's not who we are. And people who speak of our parents like that just don't understand the people that are in Guyana. And it's really quite insulting, but everybody's looking on and hearing those views and seeing who is saying what.
Understood. Thank you.
Um, there are my check suggests that there are about 214,000 students they have to give grants to.
Hmm.
And how many grants per family does every child in going to school in a family gets the 40,000?
Yes, it is. It's every child. It's not per family. It's every child in nursery up to high school. Once you're going back to school in September, you are entitled to the grant. It's a grant to prepare you for school in September. And more than 200,000 persons have already received that grant. Now, I saw this and I wanted to address it. I saw this persons trying to make this into what it's not. So in 2014, when we did this, the AP and UAFC told the population that it was an election gimmick, when that's why they were stopping it. And they also said that they were going to stop it because they would replace this with buses and boats and bicycles and boots and book bags, a 5B program. They never did. So there are entire regions that never had breakfast from them, never got a single bus, never got a single boat, no boots, anything. So they just quashed the program without replacing it with anything else. As soon as we came back in 2021, without any elections on the horizon, we did this as we did in 2022, as we're doing in 2023, and as we will do next year and in 2025. How does it become an election gimmick? Because we're this close to the local government elections, I think I see some people dishonestly trying to juxtapose the two events. They shouldn't. The first one in 2021, we did in August, late August, and the parents said to us, it is too late. We'd like to have this so that we can shop at leisure and have choices while we're trying to buy school supplies. So they didn't want it a week before school reopened. They wanted it earlier. Last year, we did it a little bit earlier, but what happened was we had to call teachers out of their holiday period. And some teachers, everybody turned up because teachers, more than anybody else, understand how important this is for the children in their classrooms. But they said to us they preferred it earlier so they don't have to disrupt their holiday to come out to do this. If there is no other time to do this, test begins around the 14th, some people the 14th, some people the 19th. So if we were not to disrupt exams and to comply with what parents said they want and what teachers said they want, this is the only time that this could be done. And so we're very happy to do it. But I think it's disingenuous for persons to say that this is an election gimmick. We didn't have an election last year. We did it. We didn't have an election the year before. We did it also.
Um, Children at kindergarten, are they also entitled to the grant?
Yes, not play schools, but nursery schools.
Nursery schools.
Hmm.
Um, well,
Public schools, private schools, everybody.
if we assume that $40,000, which is equivalent roughly to 200 US per child, that would mean that if the entire 214,000 students get their grants, you're talking about almost $9 billion Guyana pumped into the
Yeah,
economy of those areas. That's a massive sum.
into the hands of parents, into the homes of families.
Yeah,
Yep, $8 billion.
yeah. Okay,
Now,
Dr.
and the
Ganga,
comparison,
sorry.
but let's make the comparison. When we did this in 2014, it was about $1.6 billion that was required because at that time it was $10,000 with the
Mhm,
promise that every year it would go up until it reached $50,000. When the APNU came in, they said they didn't have finances for it, so they quashed it. But their food bill for
mhm,
government, their food bill for government was more than $2 billion. Their food bill went up, and their caregiving bills went down. With us, it was different. Or looking after people, welfare of people bills were high. and our expenditure on ourselves were very low. So yeah, just different philosophies, different parties.
All right. Before I pass you on to Dr. Ganga, let me just ask you this question before it slipped me. The food program, I'm not too clear on that. If you can talk a little more, and if you have future plans to provide food for all grades in school, public school.
Yeah. So what it is right now, it's for grade six and grades nursery and one and two. So grades nursery and grades one and two would be all the early childhood years. And what we give there on the coastland are fortified biscuits, fortified by with minerals and nutrients that are measured and
Mhm.
packaged deliberately to nourish children of that age, and fresh fruit juices. That's all locally done by Banks DIH and DDL. Then there's another program, the Hot Meal in the Interior, which does a village kind of economy. The village does the whatever the meal is going to be. The village cooks it. We give them the money, and they prepare the food for the entire primary population. And then there is on the coast the grade six breakfast program, where we hire individuals from the community, give them a menu prepared by Carnegie, our school of home economics. So it's measured in terms of food value, and we pay them to provide the food as well as for their labor, and that's been working splendidly across the globe. We're feeding more than 13,000 children every morning, and you haven't seen any big complaints online. And the reason for that, that's not to say we haven't had complaints, but we address them as soon as we get them.
Dr. Ganga?
Yes, I like that story about the family that you minister described. It's really beautiful because now we have, like I said, choices are available. They can spend as they see their own needs,
Yeah.
and the amount. I happen to know one pensioner who got $40,000, but and the way I knew that the money was stolen, so so there was a complaint, but 40,000 can really do some things to help families. And what's so good, it's per child.
Yeah.
It's almost like the grants in the United States per child. So
Right.
that's
So most families in Guyana have more than one children in school. So we're looking at an average of three, four children. Some
uh,
have eight, some have 10, some have two, but a lot of people have more than one. So
so
it's
in terms of adequacy, it will go a long way. It will allow them to make choices meaningful to their own family needs. So that's very good. It also has the potential, the program itself has the potential for various links, which can be, first you register the people who are going to benefit. You have a registration, and the links would be with the inflation adjustment for different groups. And down the road you can put some threshold income levels so that the program effectiveness will be enhanced greatly.
Mhm.
So I'm happy to hear about that. The I don't have a deep question. The only thing is, if you prune some of it for those who can afford, you can take that money and spend it on the program administration, which would benefit everybody. So we as you implement it, we can look for these opportunities that enhances the entire program, and I think it's on the right track for that. What I would like to see, or if there is any comment, is any targeted jobs program to raise the income levels of the different groups who would benefit from the cash grant, so
Yeah.
that go parallel together.
So there's a heavy focus being placed on training. We have a whole host of different places that are doing training. Minister Joseph Hamilton at the Ministry of Labor is doing an amazing job with training persons who don't necessarily have academic qualifications, but whose training will allow them to earn very differently. So somebody who drives, just like in your country, a heavy duty machinery, nobody cares what certificates they have except the one that says you can drive a heavy duty machinery and handle it. And that person could earn significantly different than when they were just a laborer in a back dam. And he's training thousands of persons on different programs like those. Bearing and the training is done very consciously. What is it the country will need in this oil and gas type economy? And that is what is being rolled out. Secondly, we have for the first time something called GOLD, the Guyana Online Academy of Learning, where right now more than 14,000 Guyanese are in a scholarship program training, getting degrees, PhDs, master's degrees, certificates, postgrads in universities in Europe, India, the West Indies, Asia, I think some African countries, and it's 14,000 Guyanese who, over the course of the next 2 years, are going to come back in with a different set of skills. Before the next 5 years, it's going to, well, the next 3 years, before our first 5 years, it's going to be at least 20,000 people who we train that way. And then, even as we're rolling these out, which we promised, we started rolling out some additional things because, as you know how this works, once you start doing something, you see how you can add to it to make it better. So the students who either wrote CXC and failed it or didn't get a chance to write it, or the universities that they want to go to don't accept only CXC, they need more. And some of the universities in India, for example, need that 2 years more, which is something like an A levels type qualification or CAPE. We introduced something called GROW, Get Ready for Opportunities to Work, which allows these young people mostly to do the GED or the SCQF, which is the Scottish equivalent of a GED, the completion of high school, get those certificates, and then move on to high school, to tertiary education. And you know, a couple weeks ago, we graduated 1,400 of those students. 800 turned up to the graduation because that's who we invited. But over the last 2 years, it's 1,400 that we graduated. And here is a really pleasing figure. More than 88% of those who now have high school qualification have already enrolled into universities from those countries, renowned universities outside of Guyana, all at no cost to the individual student. So even as we build out the Guyana we want to see, there's a massive training program happening all across Guyana in different fields, in different areas, through different ministries and agencies to make sure we have the kind of workforce we'll need when this becomes a mature oil and gas economy.
I would just like to add a quick point there. What you said is very encouraging and has huge potential. The foreign languages program could be emphasized at the university level because some countries at the master's level, the education is free. So the responsibility would be on the shoulders of the students to get admission first, and with the languages skill, they can contribute to those graduate programs abroad. That's how I financed my program. I had skills that I contributed to, and that earned my keep. So our students who leave Guyana can benefit with their language skills. They can do research at the university, work on campus, and so forth, and also qualify themselves for those programs out there. So
Yep.
that's something to add to another dimension that could be added for the tertiary level
And
students.
even as we do that with um, formal academic or skill training, there's a program the vice president is almost spearheading, that the government is running, where persons who were unable to get employment after many tries and so on, where there's a part-time program where for 10 days each person earns $40,000, and in that 10 days they can do a myriad of different things: help in the hospitals, help in schools, help in clean up, help in regional democratic council business, um, And so it's just trying to make sure everybody benefits at the same time from the new Guyana we are developing and building out.
Yes.
All right. Before I pass you to Professor Mahin, I just want to ask you, it's a bit cynical. Have you come across any case where a wealthy person refused to take the cash grant for the child, for his child, or children?
No, no. Um, so some people didn't turn up for the grant. I haven't seen anyone turn up and say, or that has not been reported to me that anybody came to say, I don't want it, but could you give it to X or Y that I don't
Okay.
need or something like that. So I haven't seen that.
Okay. Professor Mahin?
I mean, it's a good dialogue so far, and it'd be remiss of me not to convey my gratitude, and also I think it's on behalf of all right-minded Guyanese for your leadership and the president leadership in the recent tragedy at Madia. I think the approach you guys took there shows stewardship of a country in the right direction. As Dr. Tara indicated, there's an infusion about $8.6 billion in the economy with this cash grant. With specifics dealing with retention and enrollment, you said this is in preparation of the new class year.
Mhm.
Is there data to support retention and an increase in enrollment? And I have
Yes.
another question follow up because I'm pretty sure you can speak about this. While we are doing so great for the students and the families, is there plans afoot? I remember in a similar program there were talks or imiandos about things afoot for teachers' salary adjustments, and also given the Madia tragedy, is the ministry now looking into other safety precaution and plans to implement in schools across the country?
Yeah. So the first one is whether we see a better retention rate, better attendance. Yes, because the eligibility criteria is one that you have to be on the register. Um, that you have to be on the register and attending school. So for if you don't come to school, you don't get the grant, and that has really brought people out and had people registering. We've also seen with other efforts to try to uh, look for individually children who are being absent, who are absent from schools and exams and so on, bring them back into the system. We're seeing a stronger retention rate. Like the rest of the world, we took a serious hit with COVID. That 2 years out, the prediction of the authorities around the world was twofold. One, you'll have a severe set of learning loss, and we're seeing that. And two, that you'll have early school leaving, which is dropouts, the syndrome of dropouts. Um, I think we've tried to hold our own, and we have held our own on the dropouts issue, but that's a lot of work that went into that. We are seeing learning loss that we're trying to plug. So, yeah, I think it can work for that, but it has to be um, followed with other means and measures too. One of which is we have in 80 something high schools right now out of 116, and we're hiring where we don't have staff dedicated to counseling, guidance and career counseling, as well as psychological counseling. So as soon as a child leaves, we're supposed to know, or doesn't turn up to school, we kind of supposed to know. So we're supposed to be seeing better retention rates because we've never had that before. The second one was I don't remember. Oh, the second
Yeah,
question.
teacher salary, and the third was
Oh, so teacher salary.
safety
So,
measures.
so we said very clearly it was under the Barjack presidency that the first engagement, multi-year engagement with the Guyana Teachers Union happened. And that continued under successive PPP governments with ease. There was no problem. And what it was, it provided for a um, fixed and certain salary increase that began from the front of the year and not waited till December and then do the back pay. Uniform, well, not uniform, a clothing allowance, duty-free concessions, a scholarship program, a housing revolving fund, and a couple other things. I can't remember them all now. And that continued. In fact, the only time it was not renewed was under the APNU, and there was now what is now a very known strike in 2018. We want to continue that, and we want to work with the union. The union has a person who is an elected member, but who is also an MP and is unable, MP in the opposition benches, and is not mature enough, in my respectful view, having considered her behavior, to separate out the two. And so the union is going to have to decide, and we've had that very frank conversation with them, how they want to be led, how they want to proceed. Unions and governments are naturally adversarial. The entire relationship over history was developed in an adversarial type of atmosphere. So working with a union is never going to be easy. But I believe we can do it if we're all coming to the table with a genuine, honest attempt to make sure that this relationship works and endures to the benefit of teachers. I have said very clearly that we don't need a union to make sure teachers benefit. We would like to work with the union, but if that becomes difficult because of political interference, then we'll do it alone. So we are talking now. We have developed some subcommittees on dealing with some issues like the housing revolving fund and some automatic qualifications for teachers and so on. So we have a good working relationship, but I think every now and then that historic adversarial nature comes to the front, and instead of putting in the hard work to sit down and hammer this out in a mature way, we could end up with cross talking, which is not healthy for anybody. I'm prepared to put in the work, and I've been very clear about that.
But let me just raise this question about teacher salary. The president had said certain categories. He started with the security force, the armed forces, then the hospital, the medical staff, and he said other staff, they will do adjustments, etc. Does that apply to the teachers as well?
Yeah, he's talking about that sort of look across the board. What the president did was looked at the people who earn the least in our service providers and tried to fix them first, which is the only fair way to go. So teachers, I mean, look, I'd like to give teachers everything they want. Why would I not? I'd be the best education minister ever, everybody's hero. But teachers don't earn that poorly when you compare what other service providers are earning. So it would not have been fair or sensible to first deal with teachers. He dealt with the people who were the lowest end of the ladder with a public commitment that everybody will be addressed just in batches. And so I believe that. I trust it.
Down the road is likely that.
Very likely.
Very likely. I want to ask you something about the University of Guyana, the board of what do you call the council. This council has been in existence for a long, long time. Do they have term limits there, or how does it operate?
All right, Dr. Tara, we might have lost Minister. Hopefully, she will come back in. In the meantime, you guys can have an open discussion in regards to the topic we're dealing with tonight, which is the cash grant and the effect it has on families.
Oh, well, I would have liked to, this. I asked her a question, but she didn't fully complete it. Whether the plan of the ministry was to extend the food grant, the meal allowance, to all grades in school. She said sixth grade will get a meal, and
I think we have her back. Let's check. Give us a few. So hopefully she can answer that question for you.
Right. I didn't hear the question. I got bounced
Yeah,
from.
when I'd ask you whether, apart from not all grades in the school are entitled to the meals, if you intend at some future time to make that meal available to all students in all grades.
Right. So, there is no way I would sit here and tell you yes because it's a good, popular kind of answer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that it's going to happen. And at this point, it's a mammoth undertaking. And so we
Mm-hmm.
usually have to test these things to see, do children want it? If
Mm-hmm.
yes, what is the uptake? Is it for everyone or is
Mm-hmm.
it for children to choose in the schools? So we're looking currently at grade 5 and 6, and then possibly to say, because there are some kids, kids are funny. You must know children. Some of them tell me I ate home and ate here, but parents
Mm-hmm.
may well say to us, we don't need this for our child, so you can spread it across the school for all children who need. So those are some of the things we are looking at. Just need a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
time to
Uh,
work through.
Dr. Ganga. Oh yes,
Y-
the question about university, the council.
Yeah, that's something that we're currently looking at. It's currently receiving attention.
Okay. All right, Dr. Ganga.
Yes, I'd like to go back with the teacher's salary issue. Uh, Inflation is really a hot spot for teachers. They're like everybody else, but teachers they tend to spend their own funds to do various things. Either you can give them allowance or inflation adjustment, make some deliberate efforts to help them there. That would help them to stay on the job and also extend themselves and their hours. They have to spend money on their accommodation and everything. If you go into their homes, you might see things scattered all over. I know what that is personally. The other item is travel allowance for teachers. I had to ride a motorcycle from Covent Garden to East Ramvelt, so I know that trek very well. So travel and some other allowance. You mentioned housing. Housing. Do they qualify for any housing allowance?
Yeah. So it's an entire package that we're looking at, including remote area incentives and station allowance and so on. Um, I I think the most memes and posters around the world are made of teachers who invest their own resources back into classrooms. The most popular one being the picture that shows a teacher funded classroom and a state funded classroom. And of course, the teacher funded classroom is rich and happy looking. And that's I know teachers around the world have the same complaint. I myself lived in a home where my mother was a teacher until she retired as a headmistress, and then my aunt taught also. It was a very matriarchal home, so we all lived in the same house. Um, and they spent, I think, it was probably more expensive for them to go to work than than they earn. So I know how that is and I know how that works. But like I said, this conversation is encompassing far more than just salaries. It's a larger picture, and I don't want to compromise or interfere with that by speaking about it before we actually sit down and hammer out some of how it will work.
But then on the question of allowances, consideration has to be given. If you give consideration to teachers, you have other categories of government workers who may want the same. So it's a question of budget, whether money is available, and whether you can sustain it over a period of time. So that's
Yeah,
a
but
major.
Dr. Tara, given that you infuse from a finance perspective, given you infuse 8.6 billion in the economy, we also
Mm.
have to guard against inflation because infusing money also have inflationary ramifications. So the right timing and balance to combat
Yeah, yeah.
inflation has to be
Well,
balanced.
well, that is correct, but you gotta understand. Yes, you have money, but you also have you back up with additional services and goods. in the
And
economy.
as we give the children, including the children of teachers, because teachers have children too,
Yeah.
the cash grants, they're benefiting from this also. We're trying desperately to aggressively fix the infrastructure, the roadways and the airports and the airstrips. And I mean, these things sound like it means very little to people on the coast. But take a village like Carasparu in Region 8. You can't get to the village by any other way than aircraft. And if the airstrip isn't working, if the airstrip isn't repaired, then what you end up with is no service. No goods can get into the village, and that's a desperate situation. Fixing the airstrip, I think, is a 1 point something million dollar contract. So, it is trying to get making sure not only that we have drugs in every hospital, but that we have personnel in every hospital. We're trying to build out right now universal secondary education and universal access to primary health care. So you have state of the art hospitals going up in regions 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, I think. A new state of the art maternal and child care hospital at Turkine there. Those are all heavy infrastructural projects. And then in the education sector, places that never had secondary education before, we're trying to build that. Now, here's the trickiness about that. Whereas we just signed the contract for the rebuilding of Christchurch, which was destroyed by arson, and that was $644 million or something. It's just over 600, under 700. To put the same building deep into Region 7, it will cost us 4 times that amount because of where it is located and the transporting of all the items in and getting workers from outside on the coast. So it's 10 times the amount of investment needed in the hinterland to see quarter the amount of results or the quality of the student. And so, but we don't have a choice. We now have some funding, and even without funding, the PPP moved Guyana from a hippie country, heavily indebted poor country, to a middle income country because of prudent leadership, prudent spending, not getting caught up in all the wild calls for what could have been afforded. And we reduced our debt significantly and brought our country out of that state of being heavily indebted and poor. With funding, I think more prudence is required because you have louder calls for it. It is harder not to spend, and it requires more work to get out there and explain to people why this kind of expenditure over and above this one will make more sense for a country in the long run. And like the president said, everybody's turn is coming. Just give us a chance to do this in a way that makes sure the country does not blow up. And that's what I said. Prudent leadership is evident in the PPP's leadership, and it's not like we don't tell people why we're not doing something. We do. So at some stage, not too long off, everybody is going to be served.
All right. We're nearing the end of our program, but I just want to ask. I saw a report recently, early in the week, where some students were doing some kind of farming under the shade. I know what you call them. Perhaps
Shade,
Dr. Ganga can help me. What type of
shade
farming?
houses.
Yeah. Is this a policy of your education ministry now to get children to be involved in some type of as part of the curricula?
No, it's actually the president leading that out. He has a whole set of shade house projects where young people across the country are doing a whole host of different things that
But
are
it's
in.
not part of your the school.
It's the schools are doing TVET subjects. Almost every high school is doing agricultural science and home economics, but not necessarily in shade houses. Shade houses have some expenses that are associated with them and their management. So, and we might not have personnel, but the shade house business is actually that of H.E. Irfan Ali. He has a
Okay.
cut roses project going on where young people are growing roses and selling those. He has vegetables that haven't been popular here. Well, popular but haven't been grown here popularly. Broccoli and cauliflower,
Mm.
all kinds of other vegetables in the shade houses.
Mhm. All right. Dr. Ganga, you make your final comments.
Yeah, I see a great potential for the private sector to join hands with the government. They could have training partnerships. We do that quite a bit in the United States here. You know, they give it formal titles, and then you have endowments of grants money that flows through the partnership, contributed by the private sector and made available to schools and other projects for training. So that could be a very useful add-on to what initiatives you're taking on right now. So that's my final comment.
Okay.
Private
Mm.
sector partnerships.
Yep.
Okay. Um, Professor Mahin, your final thoughts. You here?
Professor, you might want to unmute.
Minister, I believe you're doing a wonderful job with all of the transformational things that is happening in the Ministry of Education. Aside from the cash grant and all of these new schools, is there any exciting initiative that you are embarking upon?
Yes, well, several, but two that I think are game changers. One is getting all teachers trained or in training by 2025. So we're able to do larger numbers now, as well as a higher quality, we hope, and retraining teachers who are already in the system, as well as trying to build out a better product and product in our students. I mean, we shouldn't describe students as products, but in addition to, we've always been doing very well academically. We've been topping the region. We've been going off into universities, Ivy Leagues, actually, and doing very, very well. But we also want to make sure every student exiting has um, academic qualifications, but also be a bit more rounded. So you're going to see us rolling out by September, every student being exposed to and proficient in, as distinct from um, practically as distinct from writing an exam about it, at least one sport, one instrument, one foreign language, some a TVET subject at least, and a strong sense of volunteerism. I think we should get a more rounded student in that look. And I'm looking forward to just those two small things. Of course, I'm really, really looking forward to getting schools up. I mean, physically up um, in the hinterland communities where it's going to be a brand new world for those villages. Before the end of July, we will have the completion of Queen's College, Bishops, St. Roses, St. Winifred, St. East Rumvelt, um, uh, and then Christchurch is going to finish early next year. St. George's is going to finish early next year, and then later in this year, North Belt, and those are all Georgetown-based schools. And then Yarrow Cabra on the East Bank and Good Hope on the East Coast will finish by June month end. So it's going to be a different period. Look, when we build a school, you probably have been away too long, so you wouldn't be able to imagine this. The children on the East Coast, at 6 schools, they're now sitting in hallways and under stairways of primary schools. They're high school children sitting in primary schools doing some kind of work with teachers who are not trained for secondary education. With the opening of Good Hope, I'm going to be able to close all the tops of those primary schools and put all the children in a discrete secondary school where they have facilities and teachers trained to teach secondary. And that's a big deal. It's a different type of education. Same thing with the East Bank, with the completion of Yarrow Cabra. And so we still have to keep a firm eye on quality, but we could see a very different looking Guyana in 10 years. But it's a tight program. It's not just building out the schools, it's building out personnel at the same time, training people for the kind of quality we want to produce, getting parental involvement at the same time and student interest. And it's exciting, but it's not an easy program.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. Well, we want to thank you very much. I know this is a very busy time for you, and the past 2 weeks we've been trying to get. I had two other ministers scheduled, but they had to back out because they were called to do election work, which is very important. So we thank you very much, and I want to echo Professor Mahin that you're doing a terrific job. The PP is blessed to have a cabinet that is very hardworking. They take government to the people. They revolutionize the way how politics is being governed now, and you're part of that team. And I'm still going to take up the challenge to do this follow-up study on the suicide that we
No.
did with you several years ago. So I'll
Yeah. Which
communicate with
made
you on
a
that.
measurable difference, right? And that's how I know that there is so much space for non-governmental organizations to do their
Mhm.
little bit in particular places. In
I don't know if I had sent you, but I did an article on that, and it was published in Guyana. Anyway,
Dr.
oh,
Tar, we have quite a few questions from the audience as well. If I could go ahead and start asking
related to other stuff
to
here.
Minister, yes.
Yeah, okay, once it directly related to the program, go ahead.
Uh, this question, Minister, is coming from Sandra KB Singh, and she's asking what is the controls process to make sure that the students are actually going to school and that the grant is used for students.
Right. So with any number like 214,000, there's going to be somebody who misuses. Here in Guyana, the people who receive welfare in the US, somebody's going to use it for a purpose not intended. I think with large programs, you have to make sure that the majority of people are using it. The majority of parents in this country have no more interest than they live their lives to see their children do better than they have done. And so parents who can't read and write would make sure they walk their children to school every day to make sure they're better than they are. And without the grant, they've been looking after their children and doing their very best for them. It's very difficult for me to surmise simply because we have some cynicism amongst us, perhaps derived from poor examples amongst us also. Um, that the grant should be stopped for that reason. Of course, where we can help, we do. But for the most part, it's mothers collecting mostly. I do see some fathers coming, but I think for the most part, it's being responsibly spent. Like I said, there'll be one or two people who will be delinquents in the group, and it's very difficult to filter them out.
Perfect. We also have a question from Vashanti Prasad, and she's very concerned. She says, Miss Priya, registered my child April late for the cash grant. I didn't know he will be going to nursery in September. He wasn't eligible for the grant. Can you please look back at the new intake list after 14th of April?
So, Vashanti, I want you to have this. We want you to all have it. But here's what we also want to be accountable. So, a feature that I didn't tell you about is that throughout this process, the Auditor General's Department was with us. And I mean, over 130 of their staff, from the packing of the envelopes to the vetting of the registers to the paying out of the grant. And so we asked people to register their children by the 31st of March. And then I gave an extension to the 14th of April. And it's only if you're on this register that we're going to pay anybody off it. We can't pay at this point because we can't account for that. And once we start opening, Vashanti, I'm certain, is being genuine, but there'll be people who are not. And then we have all kinds of accountability issues. When it's done, I'm going to have a look at what is remaining to see if we could pay all the new intake that didn't get registered. But that's a separate process. But
Perfect.
we want to do this, but we also want to be accountable for it.
I know there is a huge discussion tonight in regards to the cash grant. What is the rationale behind increasing the cash grant?
The promise was at least $50,000 in the first 5 years. When we first began in 2014, we said just that it was 10,000 then, but it would raise incrementally every year. until it reached 50,000. Of course, it was quashed by the AP and UAFC, so we never saw it past 10. In this new government, it began at 19, well, 15, and 4 for uniform. It's a transportation school supplies grant, and 4 for uniform, which is something we've always been doing. And then we moved it up to 25, then 35, I think, then 40. And so it's going to keep increasing until it's 50 because that's what we promise and we keep our promises.
Any chances of it going beyond 50?
It could. I said at least 50.
Exactly. Thank you. Inflation remains an issue in Guyana, and I know Professor Hari Raj mentioned this. Remains an issue in Guyana and many parts of the world. Was inflation a factor that was considered when determining the amount of the cash grant?
No, we made a promise and we stick to our promises. When we made this promise, the world was not, it had not experienced COVID and did not have the economic problems it's now having post COVID because of COVID. And so when we made that promise, people who gave us their support based on that promise, and we can't walk it back now. So even though there are, I mean, it's always very convenient to find other things you can do with money. Once we make a promise, we keep it. So you can remember that about the PPP. Once we promise something, we keep to our promises. We fulfill those promises.
Beautifully said. And last question is, what type of impact do you anticipate the distribution of the cash grant will have on families and students as well?
Right. So, without me speaking, because if you notice, I was very not, we just let families speak this year. And all over, parents are saying how much of a help it will be, how much of an assistance it's going to be for them in their preparation of their children. And very pleasantly, I saw people saying that they will pick up the slack on what it doesn't do because they are parents and they have that responsibility. Um, so overall, the on the ground, it's been very welcome, very well received, and there have been mischievous attempts to put a spoke here or there. The sensible politicians in the opposition benches have stayed away from trying to do that because they have a good read of the population and they know that they would be proverbially stoned. People are not taking kindly to that kind of thing. One or two persons have tried it and they have been dealt with by parents across this country who vote for both the PPP and the PNC. So it's been a very popular program.
Perfect. And tonight's program was definitely an attestation of what you and the PPP government is doing for the people of Guyana. I'm very proud sitting here listening to everything that was said. Thank you so much for everything that you do. I know your job is not an easy one, but it's truly a worthy one. So thank you very much to our entire panel. Thank you guys so much for being here. To our viewers, I can't thank you enough for your questions, your participation in tonight's program. Until next time, I'm your hostess, Shamiza Ali, and this is the Guyana Dialogue. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
evening.
everyone. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Professor.